Hi everyone, Will from Polygram here. In this tutorial we're going to cover how to use geometry in our Rhino or Grasshopper model as interactive UI elements for building 3D spatial buttons. This can be really useful if you want to avoid using the 2D heads-up UI on the mobile phone or the slate on a mixed reality headset and instead locate the UI for making changes to your parametric model in 3D space. Some common applications here is you might place some next and back buttons right next to a tool, which you might be using to, say, bend parts, or you might place a great big start or stop button next to where an animation is about to start or stop, etc., etc. So to create geometry buttons, we can use the components in the sync menu in Polygram. And we have three different ways of detecting events on geometry. We have hover events, which will output true or false values when a piece of geometry is hovered over with your pointer. We have tap events, which output true or false, or output true and then immediately false when you tap on an object. And we have toggle events, which output true when you first tap on an object and false when you tap on it a second time, and ad infinitum. So to start off with, let's make a little definition where whenever we press a button, we switch between two different options of a design model. I'm going to model those options now. They are going to be fairly unexciting to keep this example simple. We're going to have a box and we are going to have a sphere. Let's reference these two bits of geometry into Grasshopper because they're currently in Rhino. We'll pick our box and our sphere. We'll synchronize those and then hide them from Rhino. And we've got two geometries here, so let's plug in two materials. Our box can be white and our sphere can be red. All right, so they're both being synchronized now. They'll show up hopefully in Polygram. There they are, right there as expected, which is great. And then we have this UI here in Rhino. Now I'm going to get my button, which I'm going to use this disk here as a button. So let's reference that in with a geometry parameter as well. And then again, we can hide this from Rhino because we don't want overlap we don't want to synchronize the same geometry from Grasshopper and from Rhino. And we'll sync that geometry as well. And then it appears again in mixed reality. And we'll use an on toggle component with that sync geometry to detect taps on that disk. Now, when you enable hover or tap or toggle events on a bit of geometry like this using one of these components, Polygram will automatically go and turn on the relevant interaction mode for that geometry. So now we're detecting select events on this. When I tap on that sphere, or that disk, sorry, the value is changing from false to true, as you'd expect. All right. So now, I've set this up wrongly actually. Let's just leave that no color for now. Now what we want to do is use that sphere to change which bit of geometry is displayed in mixed reality. So let's use the list item component on our geometry to change what is being synchronized. So now we have a simple toggle here. When I tap on the disk, we're picking between one of these two options here in our geometry list. What I was thinking about doing before was also picking or toggling between two different colors. Let's do that as well, but we'll set it up slightly differently to how I made that at the start of the tutorial. Again, we'll have a list item, we'll have a list of two colors, we'll plug those into the material, and we'll use this true or false value from our toggle component just to change those two values. So now when we tap on this, we also should get gray box, red sphere. All right, that's toggling. Let's have a look at the other types. So tap and hover. Hover is easier to demonstrate in this case. So we can swap over all of our outputs here, plug those into the hover, and we can get rid of our toggle. So now whenever our pointer is over that disk, so you can see, hopefully on my mobile phone here, I've tapped on the disk and then dragged my finger off the disk. We've got box. As I drag it back over the disk, we have red sphere. So when I'm hovering over that geometry, we're getting a true or a false value. True if I'm hovering, false if I'm not. Okay, now let's look at tap events. So tapping works differently to these other two. We'll connect up a panel so we can see what it does. When you detect a tap on an object, this is going to set true once and then immediately flick back to false. So let's hide the hover so we can't see that. So true once, immediately back to false. True once, immediately back to false. We've still got our hover connected, which is why the box is switching temporarily. Now what the tap component is particularly useful for is for incrementing values. So we might want to use these two buttons, these back and forward buttons here. When a user presses forward, we might want to increment a value by 1. Like, let's say we're controlling, in the previous tutorial, we had a number slider which was synchronized to show which sphere in a list we wanted to display in mixed reality, imagining they were marbles that we might be placing in a sculpture. If we wanted to do the same thing with geometry buttons, we could detect taps on the forward button, increment a value by 1 each time, sort of almost like clicking the next button with our slider, or detect taps on a back button and decrease that button by 1 with each press. We'd probably store the value of our a number in our sequence using a global variable. And so to understand how global variables work, you can go and check out a later tutorial. Okay, that's geometry buttons.